Welcome back into Wake Up America. Thanks for being with us today. I'm Rob Finnerty. Only 3 presidents have been formally impeached in American history: Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton back in the 1990s, and President Donald Trump. But no president has faced a possible second impeachment during a presidential term, and that's what President Trump could be facing this week. And here to talk about this is New York Times bestselling author and historian, as well as a Ronald Reagan biographer and the author of the book December 1941. Craig Shirley is back with us. Pleasure to have you on the show, sir. I want to talk to you a little bit about just impeachment and what it's done to presidents in recent history. Richard Nixon, early 1970s, he started drinking a lot more. He became more of a recluse. He didn't make public addresses. He didn't address the media. He looked terrible when he left office. And we saw the same thing in the 90s with Bill Clinton. He rebounded a little bit, but Monica Lewinsky, all that, it ruined him. You look at Donald Trump right now. He looks just like he looked when he took office. He is a fighter. I think this is why the American people elected him 4 years ago, and this is why 74 million plus people voted for him on November 3rd. But it's just a totally different way of handling what usually just destroys somebody, isn't it?
Yeah, no, absolutely right, Rob. Some men internalize things and it wrecks them for the rest of their lives. Other men let it wash off their back like water off a duck, and it doesn't faze them. I'm sure at some level, this has some effect on Donald Trump. It has to have any effect. But I think that he looks at this as being the whole Russian investigation as being a partisan investigation, not a legitimate going after himself or doing any wrongdoing whatsoever.
Tell me a little bit, Craig, about Richard Nixon. This is the one we saw Bob Woodward compare Donald Trump to Nixon and claim that he was worse than Richard Nixon in his worst moments. We all saw that Axios interview. The thing with Richard Nixon is he was able to sort of resurrect his reputation. I mean, I can think of pictures before he passed away in the early 90s, and he's in the Oval Office, and the living presidents at that time were deferential to President Nixon. He was sort of the head guy in the room, even though they were all presidents. Is that something that typically happens?
In 1981, just after Reagan became president, Anwar Sadat was assassinated, and he sent the 3 former presidents to represent him at Sadat's funeral. The Secret Service said it was too dangerous for President Reagan to go, so he asked the 3 former presidents, and one of them was Richard Nixon, and he acquitted himself quite well. He did go on to become an elder statesman. He did go on to write something like 20 more books after he was president. He never addressed the Republican convention again, but he was well thought of. People sought his political advice and his acumen and things like that. He had a very good brain, and he was able to move beyond being the first president to resign, the only president to resign the office of the presidency of the United States. So he did quite well.
Yeah,
under the circumstances.
It's unbelievable because in 1972, Nixon won a very decisive victory.
61% of the vote.
It's unbelievable. And 2 years later, he was stepping onto Marine One. We all remember that, the peace sign. Nixon, it was part of his legacy when he died.
Actually, they used to be the victory sign.
That's right. Winston Churchill, V for victory. Yeah,
exactly. Yep. Bingo. Very good.
God, I love having you on. So quick question about Nixon. So he part of his legacy, and it might become a bad part of his legacy, but up until basically now, part of his legacy was, he opened the doors to China. And yes, that was, one of the big components of his legacy. Should he have kept those doors closed?
No. We live in a global world. We have to coexist with other countries. Doesn't mean we have to like them or get along with them. But, Reagan opened the doors to Russia, Soviet Union, and signed the most sweeping regulation or declassification of intermediate range missiles in the Cold War history. So I think that, becoming isolationist and closing our borders and closing our walls is not practical.
Craig, by the way, I'm looking behind you. Did you take down the Christmas tree this weekend?
Actually, my wife and my daughter did.
Good. We did the same thing. We always leave it up a little. I like the lights, so we leave it up a little later. The needles get everywhere, though. I hate to do this, but we're 9 days away from an inauguration. Joe Biden's the president-elect. He says he wants to have the ceremony at the U.S. Capitol as his right. I'm sure security will be amped up quite a bit. But at a certain point, it does become time to sort of start looking at legacy. When it comes to President Trump, what do you think his biggest legacy will be as time goes on?
He unleashed a populist revolution in America that hadn't been seen since Teddy Roosevelt. That's what. But you know what? It took 150 years for a decent book to be written about Andrew Jackson. I don't think it'll take that long for his presidency to be calmly, coolly assessed. But it does take time for the ground to cool and for people's attitudes to calm down. To look at him analytically and not just emotionally,
right.
And I think that at some point in our lifetime, probably in a short amount of time, is that somebody will come forth with a book or a series of books looking at Trump's presidency in the whole specter of things, and not just one last accusation made against him.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how his vaccine, Operation Warp Speed, plays into it. This vaccination process, I know we're having trouble getting it out to people, but doing this in 9 months will be part of his legacy as well. And
Absolutely.
we look back at George W. Bush fondly now. We see him paint, and he's out there with Michelle Obama, and we're like, oh yeah, the good old days. It's ironic how quickly we forget.
Harry Truman left office with a 22% approval rating, and he's now regarded as a near great president.
Yeah. Dewey beats Truman. All right. Craig Shirley, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. I always enjoy it.
Thank you, Rob.
All right, still a lot more to get to here on Wake Up America this morning, including my interview. Welcome back into Wake Up America. I'm Rob Finnerty. From the hottest app in the world to not at all right now. Companies like Amazon, Apple, Google, and virtually all of Parler's business associates have cut ties with the free speech platform. The network was cruising along as the #1 app in America, gaining quickly in popularity on all accounts, right up until basically the riots that we saw last week on Capitol Hill. They were yanked and the platform has been taken down. Joining us this morning to talk about all this is the Chief Policy Officer at Parler, Amy Peikoff. Amy, good morning. Thanks for being with us. This is just hugely concerning, and it should be to all Americans, not just conservative Americans. This should be to all Americans. First Amendment rights there's a reason it's the very First Amendment and not, the 11th or 10th or 6th. It's one of our most important rights as Americans. Parler is gone. It seems like in conjunction with Twitter, these big tech companies are enormous now. The power they wield is huge. Tell us about the last couple days at Parler.
Well, we were surprised on Friday by first Apple sending us notice that we had to make certain changes. Otherwise, they were going to pull us from the App Store within 24 hours. And then about an hour and a half later, a notice from Amazon. The thing that was interesting about Amazon is that they had communicated with me a couple days before that and sent a message about inciting content in general, no specific content. And I wrote back to them and I said, we are dealing with this content like everybody else on the internet, because of course it was not only on Parler, it was everywhere, given the unusual and I think very, nobody anticipated that it was going to be this bad last week, right? Given those unusual events, it was everywhere. And I said, we're dealing with this content. We're cooperating with law enforcement. Let me know if you would like to discuss further. And I received a reply on Thursday saying that this was for your information and we consider this matter resolved. And that was Thursday. Friday afternoon is when we got the notice later. It was, about 3, I think, my time. And we've been scrambling ever since.
I mean, no company can make that change that quickly. It doesn't matter how big you are. If you're Facebook or Twitter, no company can be expected to react that quickly to a mandate like that. Could this destroy Parler?
I mean, it could. We are fighting to get back online and find different vendors for this. But again, the short notice and the inability, or at least the unwillingness for them to work with us as we go for a solution. We had our tech team scrambling all weekend, figuring out ways that we could tag this content, and they were working on that. And we were speaking, having communications with Amazon yesterday, and they would not allow us to implement this system and see if it would satisfy. And again, I believe this is a very unusual time. Nobody wants this content on their platform. It's both illegal and it's contrary to the mission of Parler. We're a nonpartisan town square. Right. And the whole purpose is to have productive discussion. You can't have that with incitement to violence. At the same time, we very much think we would want to avoid living in Orwell's 1984, where every piece of content online is scanned, whether there's any particularized suspicion or not. And so we had been working towards a solution. Everybody was, I think, a bit surprised, at least, about how events went this last week. It's a very unusual circumstance, and the content was everywhere.
Yeah.
So we do believe we were singled out.
Yeah, and basically they are trying to claim that the company was responsible, ostensibly, for what happened on Wednesday. Is that correct?
They were trying to say that, but we know that there were groups on Facebook were a much more efficient way to plan something. We don't have a groups feature. We have been planning to bring one out. I think that planning, if there was any planning of these events, it was going on in other places where there were more efficient tools to do that.
Amy, shouldn't people, just every American, whether this is apolitical, this issue is completely apolitical. If we were on CNN or MSNBC right now, I would conduct this interview the exact same way. This is not a partisan segment on Newsmax. Twitter and many of these other social media companies, particularly Facebook, seem to only censor one way. I was looking at it this morning. This is still active. The Ayatollah Khamenei still has a Twitter account. Many extremist groups still have Twitter accounts, but Parler is singled out and taken down. Your thoughts?
Yes, I mean, we have a reputation of being a conservative platform, even though we have always been nonpartisan in all of our policies. And, we open this public square for everyone to come have discussions. That's been our position throughout. And we think that having a nonpartisan forum for discussion where people can actually discuss varying viewpoints and important issues of the day and come to some sort of understanding of each other is a very important thing. And at the same time, we want to provide that while respecting people's privacy. And that's been our mission all along.
By the way, that George Orwell book that you mentioned, 1984, it shot up. It's one of the most popular books on Amazon. It was.
It's not supposed to be an instruction manual.
Yeah.
It's not supposed to. It's a dystopian novel.
No, absolutely. How concerning is it right now that big tech companies are trying so actively to limit? And by the way, you mentioned it's become it's evolved. Parler's evolved into sort of a messaging board for conservative voices. And you said that with a little hesitation. And I understand that as a conservative. It seems like every time you say that, it's like you're saying something you shouldn't be saying. It's okay to be a conservative in this country. How concerning is it to you that places like the Department of Justice haven't stepped in here to sort of override this? There's one thing about this, right? We have, like I said, been cooperating with law enforcement because there have been some people that they wanted to get information about in connection with the events of January 6th. And as far as I know, I haven't, it's early this morning and everything just got taken down while I was asleep overnight. Right.
I don't think I can even access data to help anybody with it. So, I don't think this is going to be good for anybody. It's not good for freedom of expression. It's not good for anybody trying to help prevent or address the events that might take place in the real world.
Yeah.
We all think that social media is the reality, but the concern for me has always been, are people actually going to use these words and take some action in the real world? And what can I do to, try to help that doesn't take place? And the best thing I think you can do is cooperate with those requests. And how can we do that now, right?
Amy, Facebook, Parler, by the way, if you're just joining us right now, this is Amy Peikoff, an executive with Parler. Parler was a very fast-growing social media company. Facebook, by the way, had pages for Hezbollah and ISIS at one point. And those obviously probably could be safely considered extremist. I want to get your reaction to the Apple and Amazon. This is the language they put out. They said that Parler's being taken down because they, quote, have not demonstrated it can adequately address threats of violence. Your take on that?
Okay, so as I said, this content is everywhere. And it's clear to me that the standard that they want is, that they want everybody to meet is one that requires the installation of a machine learning algorithm, some sort of AI that is going to detect all of this. And we, of course, have resisted that, again, because we want to respect user privacy. We believe that innocent people about whom you have no particularized suspicion,
Right.
should not be surveilled. That's the principle of the Fourth Amendment of our Constitution, and we have tried to embody that on Parler. So we say if we become aware of this content, we take it down as quickly as possible. But scanning every piece of content on the internet all the time, that is Orwell's 1984, and we want to avoid it. You might do it for a short time in an emergency measure. Maybe we say this week is, but those companies were not working with us on this. We were trying to explore solutions, and they just shut us down.
Yeah, it's back to the First Amendment. Shouldn't it just be up to the American people to decide to go to use these social media platforms and then decide for themselves, which way they want to think or lean or anything? Isn't that the design?
Yes, and I mean, that was one of the features, of course, as well on Parler, is that we did not have policies against so-called misinformation. People can think critically and decide for themselves. And, even with respect to some of this content that was inciting out there, there was plenty of critical thinking about this. There were some conspiracy theories behind it. And you would see in the comments, this is organic fact checking from people on Parler saying, really, and questioning this and having the discussion. And that's what we think is healthy.
It's just terrible. We appreciate you joining us on this Monday. This is going to be a conversation we're going to be having all week long, to say the least. Amy Peikoff, thank you so much. Keep us posted.
Thank you. We will.
All right, we've got a lot more to come on Wake Up America this morning. And don't forget to download the Newsmax app. One of the White House correspondent, Emerald Robinson, senior advisor for strategy for the Trump campaign, Steve Cortez, is back with us. Constitutional law attorney Amir Benno and our political analyst, Mark Halperin. We have got a large panel this morning, but we've certainly got a lot to talk about. I know you guys had your earpieces in a minute ago. First Lady Melania Trump tweeting out a long message to the American people. She's somebody that is normally sort of takes a step back and is not somebody we hear a lot from. If you've seen this, what are your thoughts, Emerald?
Well, she's getting criticized for not putting out an immediate statement, but she's so often criticized in the media. She is very reserved and she takes time to think, and she's very thoughtful when she puts something out. So clearly they took some time to craft this message and put it out. I haven't gotten to read the statement in full. I saw a few excerpts from it, but she started getting attacked by several of my colleagues in the White House press corps, most notably, which is expected. She usually does. Normally, a first lady like her would have been on Vogue and the cover of magazines, and over the last 4 years, she's been pretty consistently criticized.
The White House press corps has been so graceful to Melania Trump. They treated her basically exactly like they treated Michelle Obama and Laura Bush before her.
Oh, of course, yeah. Totally.
Mark, what are your thoughts on sort of the next several weeks with Melania and President Trump?
Well, they, like any couple leaving the White House, they have a lot of decisions to make, some symbolic, some substantive. I think that clearly what she's doing in part is trying to make sure that her life and her son's life after she leaves the White House are not diminished by what's happened this past week. And I think there's a real danger now that for both of them, along with the president, their opportunities in the post-White House years are going to be really limited by an attempt to punish them and to treat them in a way that reflects the views of half the country, but not all the country.
Steve, your thoughts?
I think there's a clear agenda right now of the corporate media as well as the Democratic Party, including Joe Biden, who claims he's about healing, but his actions show exactly the opposite. They are trying to vilify President Trump, his family, but I think even more importantly than that, to vilify our entire movement. They want the America First populist national movement to be silenced. They want it to be
All right, looks like we lost Steve there. I do want to play a soundbite from Joe Biden weighing in on the 25th Amendment and whether or not over the next 9 days Democrats should move to impeach President Trump for a second time. Take a listen.
If we were 6 months out, we should be moving everything to get him out of office.
All right, I'm going to run right through everyone. Emerald, we'll start with you, but I want to get everybody's reaction to this.
Well, Joe Biden didn't say conclusively that he said if it was 6 months out. But look, they've been trying to impeach him since day one. They're going to try to impeach him up to the last day. Nancy Pelosi was pretty clear last night on 60 Minutes as to why, saying that they don't want to see him run for office again. They're clearly concerned about 2024.
Amir?
Well, that's interesting, Rob. I mean, and Emerald, I mean, because there's a split on constitutional authority as to whether or not, if they impeach him, and the first time that the Senate will get this, pursuant to a memo that Mitch McConnell put out, would be an hour after he's already left office, after Joe Biden has been inaugurated. So you'd have an impeachment, the articles filed while he was still president, but then you'd have to have a trial that the basis would be to remove him from office after he's already removed. So there's a lot of strong constitutional arguments that this isn't even constitutional, that you cannot do this. But to Emerald's point, that perhaps what the Democrats are trying to do is to neutralize him so that he can't run again. There's constitutional authority, legal authority that says that running for president and running for the House or the Senate is not disqualified. So even if you are impeached and removed, that would apply to different offices, appointed offices, ambassadorships, judgeships, but not necessarily to the presidency or to the House or the Senate. So I think the whole point, and this is what Steve was saying before, is I think that's a pretext what Nancy Pelosi is saying. What they want to do is they want to make Donald Trump and his brand, his policies, America First, completely toxic. They want to drive these Republicans like Pat Toomey, Lisa Murkowski, Mitt Romney, and the rest of them over to the Democrat Party, which is going to go full bore in the socialist direction. And they have a very perilous majority. So they want to have as many Republicans in their corner as possible to get that progressive agenda accomplished. And that is the real reason that they're doing this.
All right, so that's the legal side of what would happen over the next several days with the 25th Amendment if the Democrats do proceed with this. The human side's a little bit different. Mark, and I want to get your opinion, Steve, I know you're back with us as well. Is this good for the country, an impeachment of the president with 9 days before we swear in a new president?
This is the really representative of the split we've seen over the last several presidencies. On the Democratic side, there's the belief they have no option but to try to remove the president from office. Most likely, their attempt will be through impeachment and then a trial in the Senate. On the other side is a belief that this is a crisis for the country, that this is overkill, unwarranted, and will only serve to exacerbate the tensions between both sides. So I find this to be a depressing coda to what happened on Wednesday as the country hurtles down a process that the Democrats say is trying to seek justice or some sort of resolution, and it will achieve neither.
You know, Joe Biden, Steve, says that all he wants is peace for our country. Then he says, he's speaking out of both sides of his mouth. Friday, he says that he would support an impeachment proceeding if the leadership in the House and Senate decided to do that. What about that, given what we just saw on Wednesday? Do you think that would incite more violence in Washington for January 20th, which is Inauguration Day?
Well, I hope it doesn't incite actual violence, but it's certainly going to incite a heck of a lot of righteous anger, as it should. I don't want anybody to resort to violence, but I do want people to be properly angry about what's going on in this country. And Joe Biden, for him to pretend that he is a healer is just ludicrous. For one thing, he should stop spreading the most poisonous lie in American public life, which is the Charlottesville lie. He did that again last week. Secondly, it's almost comical, except it's too tragic, but it's almost comical that today in the Congress they could potentially be advising that this president, President Trump, fall under the jurisdiction of the 25th Amendment. Because here's the reality. We have a president-elect who's about to be inaugurated, Joe Biden, who may very substantially need to be looked into regarding the 25th Amendment. I think everybody who is honest, who's going to take an objective look at Joe Biden, knows that this is a boxer who no longer belongs in the ring. So the actual purpose of the 25th Amendment is a president who is incapacitated, who is incapable of handling the most difficult job in the world, which is the United States presidency. The 25th Amendment is a serious scenario, and it may very well play out in coming weeks and months with Joe Biden, not with Donald Trump.
Yeah, you can't just, Nancy Pelosi, you can't just use the 25th Amendment if you don't like somebody. Mark, what are you hearing about Joe Biden's mental state right now as a 78-year-old incoming president, the oldest in history?
Well, they've been able to really stage manage the transition process where he comes out once a day, usually at most, and some days no amount, and gets lots of rest and is able to be largely scripted. So I don't think we've seen him tested the way he's clearly going to be tested just in a couple weeks when he's commander-in-chief. I still expect him to give a short inaugural address, to be relatively scripted and unavailable as president as compared to President Trump. But this is going to test him without a doubt, and his people around him recognize the fact that this will put him in a different light than he's been in for some time.
All right. Got to leave it there. Thank you guys so much. That is Emerald Robinson, Steve Cortez, Mark Halperin, and Amir Benno. We appreciate your time, guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, coming up, we got a lot more to cover on Wake Up America this morning on this Monday. Next, the editor. There you have it right there. That is just after 11 o'clock in the morning last Wednesday, before what started off as a rally turned into more of a protest and eventually turned into a riot on Capitol Hill. But I'll let you decide for yourself. Did the president incite violence right there? That was President Trump urging people to protest peacefully during his remarks at the Save America March on January the 6th, just hours before those violent protests happened on Capitol Hill. In the wake of the chaos in Washington, conservative voices, including the president himself, have been pulled off several different social media platforms. He's been banned from Twitter permanently, calling into question our freedom of speech and many of our civil liberties as Americans. And joining us this morning is the man who co-hosts the War Room podcast alongside former Trump chief strategist Steve Bannon. All right, coming up on 9 o'clock on the East Coast. Before we let you go, let's check in with the host of National Report, Sean Kreisman, and Emma Reckenberg. Guys, good morning.
Good morning to you. Happy Monday, I guess.
Yes.
Still more news to cover. Still, as we approach Inauguration Day next week, Democrats still talking about plans to move President Trump out of office, talking about a second impeachment. But can that happen? What are the effects of that with the Senate not coming back in time to get this done? Does it even matter at this point? There's a lot of questions to it. We're going to try to get the answers for you.
Yeah, going to speak to Vernon Jones about that, and also talking about censorship when it comes to social media. Of course, over the weekend, we saw the president being banned on Twitter. Also, we've noticed a lot of potentially conservative voices online not being allowed to tweet anymore, or perhaps they're leaving the app completely. We also heard from the spokesperson at Parler in Rob's great interview, talking, of course, about how the competition is trying, but you are up against Apple and Google and Amazon that will prevent these apps from really taking steam. So we're going to see what happens there.
Senator, you talked a little bit about this. What did you find out about Parler as far as that's concerned, or where it stands now? Because if I understand it, a lot of folks are saying they can't use the app.
Yeah, so I mean, this could put Parler out of business, and this was a company that could have had $1 billion valuation if they were allowed to stay open, like so many other. Basically, it's censorship of social media, but it's only one-sided censorship that we're seeing on Facebook and Twitter in particular. And if you've got a conservative voice or you're a conservative social media company like Parler, good luck. Good luck to you in Joe Biden's America, which will begin in 9 short days. January 20th is Inauguration Day. Coincidentally enough, Melania Trump actually was active on Twitter this morning. She put out a tweet, basically a long article talking about condemning the violence that we saw last Wednesday, but also talking about how we need to heal as a nation. Fascinating. You can see that on Melania Trump's Twitter account as well.
Rob Finnerty from Wake Up America. Rob, good to see you. National Report starts right now. Democrats and their allies in the media, big tech, big business, who for years pushed the Russia hoax and spent the better part of last year encouraging protests that turned violent across America, now working overtime to demonize and erase President Trump and millions of his supporters from private and public life, all while preaching for unity. Good Monday morning to you. We are glad you're here. Welcome to National Report. I'm Sean Kreisman.
I'm Emma Reckenberg. In just the last 72 hours, Democrats have launched an unprecedented plan to not only remove President Trump, but to prevent him from holding political power ever again. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi given Vice President Mike Pence a new ultimatum: invoke the 25th Amendment by tonight, or Democrats are going to move forward with a new impeachment. Meanwhile, big tech companies like Twitter have now completely banned President Trump from their platforms. Also, online payment companies like Stripe have stopped processing payments for the president's campaign website.
In the meantime, President-elect Joe Biden, who says he ran for office in order to restore the soul of the nation, has been completely silent. Last time Biden was on camera on Friday, he seemed to only add more fuel to the fire.
So I think it's important we get on with the business of getting him out of office. The quickest way that will happen is us being sworn in on the 20th. What action happens before or after that is a judgment for the Congress to make.
All right, for the latest on that, what we can expect in the days ahead, we'll bring in now Newsmax White House correspondent Emerald Robinson.
Republicans and Democrats have an eye on the future of Donald Trump even after he leaves office.
It's not clear. The Constitution permits impeachment, conviction, and prohibition against ever serving again, which is a separate vote. That's permitted after a person has left office, which is what would have to happen here. So whether that could be done in a binding fashion is really an open question.
Senator Pat Toomey from Pennsylvania, one of the two Republican lawmakers calling for the president to resign, saying the Constitution isn't clear on how binding impeachment would be once Trump has left office. But Pelosi making it clear on why Democrats want to pursue impeachment.
All right, for reaction to all of this, we welcome a Georgia Democrat, now turned Republican, Vernon Jones. He's been a big supporter of the president, and he's going to talk about his response to how this has all played out. Vernon, what do you make of this rush to get the president out of office with only 9 days left in his term?
Well, first of all, I think you will agree that impeaching this president a second time does not heal this country. Actually, it further divides this country, and we don't need that right now. Next, there's no way in the world the president can be impeached in the House and it goes through the Senate. There's not enough time for that. So why are we wasting time? And then to come back after this president leaves office, which he said, he wants a peaceful transition. Why do you want to come back after this and try to impeach a president and a new Congress? That shows you that Congress is not focused. They're not focused on COVID. They're not focused on creating jobs. They're not focused on elections. I would say elections integrity. And, you know, it's kind of ironic that where was Congress when Antifa and Black Lives Matter were burning and destroying buildings, including federal courthouses, police cars, police stations, and not to mention people died? Why didn't Congress and Joe Biden pass a resolution urging those violent terrorist activities from Antifa and Black Lives Matter? So enough already. Enough is enough. Let's move this country forward. Let's look for what we can do to get people back to work, get businesses started back again, creating jobs, growing our way out of this I won't say recession, but out of the deficit, and making sure that we don't raise people's taxes and hurting working families. That's where Congress should be right now.
I want to talk to you, though, about where Congress is, where the House is at, where Speaker Nancy Pelosi is thinking. There's reports of the drafted article of impeachment charges, them being incitement of insurrection. Vernon, you yourself, you attended the president's rally there on the 6th. You listened to the words that he said. Would those charges accurately reflect what you heard from the president's own mouth on January 6th?
Let me tell you, there were thousands and thousands